I did work in the government, so I have a lot of acronyms, Jarrell, I could give you. And I've carried them over to SFLA, and usually it's the first week the staff is pretty confused because they don't understand what a CGF or EIB or MDR are. And we have to do an acronym training course just for those team members. You know, I normally, when I speak to distinguished audiences like this, I'll start my presentation off with a story. I usually talk about a difference maker, someone who challenged the status quo, who courageously stood up to injustice, and someone who, through sheer grit and faithfulness, answered a call that was placed on their heart that went on to impact thousands and maybe even millions of people. But this morning I failed to do that. I was, it's not because of my lack of sleep, spending a lot of time in the Minneapolis airport yesterday, but I simply can't come up with a story or someone to share with you because you all each deserve that special spot in one of my presentations. Because each of you are the difference makers. You're the ones who are challenging the status quo in your communities, in your countries. You're the ones that are courageously standing up against the culture of death that we see across our nation. You're that center, that beacon of light and hope in your community that stands apart from that crusty abortionist at the bad part of town. You're the ones that have done that. And you're the ones who stick through it. That stubbornly stick through it no matter what happens. Because you're faithful to the call that the Lord has placed in your heart. Even when a key staffer quits, a major donor that you might have withdraws his support, or when that mother you thought who was going to choose life chooses death. You are those difference makers. You know, I remember my first interaction with Heartbeat. As Peggy mentioned, I got involved in the pro-life movement when I was 15. And I started volunteering at a Heartbeat-affiliated pregnancy center in Steubenville, Ohio. Now, at 15, I have to admit a couple things. First of all, I am the first child, and I have a very driven father. This will explain a lot soon. But at 15, I thought I had my life planned out. I was going to become an aeronautical engineer. I had just won a scholarship. Yes, they do offer these, a scholarship to the U.S. Space Academy. And I was going to graduate high school early, which I ended up doing, but I was going to graduate early so I could get to Penn State earlier to get my degree so I could make my tons of money and I could go work for NASA. That was my goal. My boyfriend at the time thought he struck it rich because his girlfriend was going to be rich. 10 years later, my husband still wonders what happens to that dream. I had this plan for my life. And then this woman at my church came up to me one Sunday morning and asked, "What are you doing this summer?" And I said, "I don't know. I have to do some volunteering. I might go down to the food shelf or something like that." And she said, "You know what? Why don't you come and volunteer with me? I'm an accountant at a pregnancy help center." So I said, "Sure, sounds good. I'm for women. I'm a Christian." I think if you would have asked me at the time if I was pro-life or pro-choice, I probably would have said, "Yeah, I'm pro-life." But if you would have asked me questions about what that meant, you probably would have started to see what we see with most people, right? That mushy middle of, well, maybe it's okay to abort a child in this circumstance or that circumstance. I had some experience in the pro-life movement because I remember when I was 8, my cousin and I painfully decided to ride our bikes to the 4th of July parade in front of my mom's Right to Life float. And I remember people getting angry, and I remember the pain of riding your bike for miles and miles, or what seemed like it as a 7 or 8-year-old. I remember my mom telling me stories about, going to the life chain and people being mean to us in Steubenville. But I really had no perspective. I had no idea what I was getting myself into that morning when I walked into AIM. And I remember it pretty clearly because I was nervous. I didn't know what was going on. It was in downtown Steubenville, which I had this huge lecture from my dad the night before about how I had to be careful, and it was a bad part of town, and how I had to put the anti-theft thing on my steering wheel, and I was really nervous. Like, what am I going to be doing? And the women at the center were so excited to see me. It was like this rushing of, "You're here!" So I started, doing the accounting, stapling papers, making binders. And a few days, Sharon, the executive director, looked at me and she was like, would you be willing to do more? Is there more you'd like to do here? And I said, sure, sounds great. So they kind of, locked me in that room with all the pregnancy center books. We always talk about how we don't have locks on the doors at the pregnancy help centers. I don't know, I think I was locked in the room because I had a stack of VHS tapes, all of the pro-life videos from the 1980s and 1990s, every book, every pamphlet, and I was told, read this, watch this. And so I was taking books home at night. But I fell in love with the pro-life movement. I remember watching a video, it was Dr. Nathanson talking about the abortion procedure in the silent screen. Then I remember putting in that video Father Frank when he was holding a child that had been aborted through saline abortion. And just thinking, what have I been doing? Why aren't people outraged over this? So I started getting more involved in the pregnancy center. I started taking the donations that were coming in, and as usual per the young person job, I was tasked with organizing the supply room. The 60-year-old volunteers did not want to get up on the little ladder and have to organize and sort the formula, put the new formula in the back and the old formula in the front. And then I sort of asked questions, being the millennial that I am, can I change this up a bit? Can I do something different? Can I make an inventory? And Sharon kindly agreed, and not all the time. I'm not saying every idea I had worked, but she allowed me to do this work. I stayed late. I stayed after my hours just to reform the supply closet, which was my domain. I found this old computer, and no one was using it. It wasn't even hooked up. I said, can I hook this up? And they said, sure. I started using the computer. I saw the donor newsletter, and I said, can I use some clip art on the donor newsletter? And they allowed me. I'm dating myself, I know. And soon I started to be able to do more serious things. I started to answer the phones. Sharon started letting me sit into the counseling sessions. And before long, I was counseling women. Girls my age and younger coming in, but mostly women who were older than me. I was counseling them as a 15-year-old. Now, when I returned back that fall, when I returned back to school that fall, it was kind of a letdown because I'd spent this whole summer helping women, saving babies, and now I was back to school. And all day I was thinking, what am I missing at AIM? Who's calling in? What's going on? So I haphazardly started my first pro-life group, Teens for Life, at my school. And I've come to realize that all those mistakes I made and all that hard work and drama that came along with starting that pro-life group was great training for what I do today. And I used that group to volunteer. I recruited more volunteers for AIM. I helped do car washes and baby showers. Anything I could to raise awareness about AIM Crisis Pregnancy Center that was just across the river from our town. I returned back to AIM throughout my summers in college, volunteering, and I remember one of the greatest moments was when Sharon decided to go on vacation the summer before my senior year of college, and she asked me to be the fill-in executive director for the week. And it was paid. That was one of the highest honors that I had ever had bestowed upon me. Ladies and gentlemen, AIM changed my life forever. The time that they gave me, the passion they instilled in me, is something that will never go away. You see, they lit a candle. They lit a candle with this young 15-year-old whippersnapper that came in, and I took that candle. And now today, it's so amazing to see that that one candle went on to go form Students for Life, and now we have 22 other candles like me on our team that go to campuses every single day who are literally lighting thousands and thousands of candles a year. It just was one person. It was a difference maker at AIM trying to make a difference in my life. Since 2006, Students for Life, we've grown from 100 what we thought were active pro-life groups to about 840 in high school, colleges, medical and law schools across the country. It's been remarkable to see what's been happening out there on campuses. Our annual conference had about 400 people. This year, Peggy was one of our Defender of Life award winners. Between our East Coast, our East Coast and our West Coast National Conference, we had 2,700 young people. This December, we surpassed 21,000 trained young people. And this year, we know we have at least, and this is a lowball estimate, conservative estimate, as Peggy would say, 80,000 students who are actively involved in the pro-life movement, who are giving at least $18 million of their in-kind volunteer work to this movement. We've implemented a strategy, and our strategy can be a little risque at times. Our strategy is a little different from most of the pro-life movement. Our strategy is to end abortion doing what other social movements have done, particularly the anti-smoking movement, particularly the pro-gay marriage movement. We watch what everybody does. We don't focus our time on Washington, D.C., even though we're near it. We focus our time where culture is made and where culture is changed. And that's in our schools. That's with our young people. Because youth is sexy. Hollywood looks to young people to figure out what's going on in the movies, what's going on in the trends. It's the young people who set the culture. And it's working. When we started SFLA, we came up with this slogan, I am the pro-life generation. We put it on signs, it's on t-shirts. There's so many trademark violations of it right now, it's not even funny. I've just embraced it. Go ahead, steal it. But it works. And when we made it up, we kind of didn't know if we were the pro-life generation. We knew polls were going our direction, young people. We could feel the shift on campuses. But we just claimed it. We kind of did what the other side does all the time. When I go to the feminist majority conferences and they say, we are the majority and there's 80 people in the room. So we just said it. We're the pro-life generation. And guess what? It worked. Because people like to join a winning side. We are the pro-life generation. And that's not a fib. It's not an exaggeration. Polls show that this generation views abortion differently. We've had unique experiences with abortion. We've seen our brothers and sisters in the womb through the ultrasound. We've sat and cried with a friend when she talked about abortion. We've Googled the bloody images. We see abortion differently. This January in Washington, D.C., I don't know if anyone was able to come out for the March for Life, but you could feel the tide turning. And a sea of 600,000 people at the largest social mobilization day of the whole year, 3/4 of that crowd was under 25. And I can go through the stats with you. I can show you how we're winning, how Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry is retreating, how they won't even use the word abortion or choice anymore because they know that's harmful to them. I can go through all the stats about the state legislation that's been passed, or the abortion facilities are shutting down, or the number of pregnancy help centers that are rising up. We know we're winning. We can see it. But this morning, I kind of come to you with a little bit of a mission, and Jorel has given me permission for this mission. So you can just be angry with Jorel instead of me. I've come with you with a mission. And that mission is we're winning, but our work is not done yet. And I'd like to share with you some ideas, some tips, some things to get you started thinking how you can work with this pro-life generation. How can you work with them? Yes, I love pregnancy center directors. Look, you got your pencils out, you got your notebooks out, you are ready to go. And you know what, I specifically wrote this for you because I put it in bullet points. I have 5 do's and 5 don'ts. So there you go. We're going to start out with the don't column first. I'm going to make you really mad. Okay. Now I realize that working with students can be difficult. I am a millennial, technically. I do not operate like a millennial.